Picture this. In 1996, Turner Sports was an empire. Ted Turner owned the Atlanta Braves, the Atlanta Hawks, the Atlanta Thrashers, and World Championship Wrestling, a wrestling promotion so dominant it was crushing Vince McMahon's WE in ratings every single Monday night. Turner Sports was worth billions. Fast forward just 5 years to 2001. All of it gone. The Braves, Hawks, and Thrashers sold off for pennies on the dollar. WCW, once valued at $67 million with serious buyers lined up, was liquidated to Turner's biggest rival for a humiliating $4.2 million. Ted Turner personally lost $8 billion to 80% of his entire fortune in what would become one of the most catastrophic corporate dismantlings in American business history. And at the center of it all was one man, Jamie Kellner. This is the story of how a single executive systematically destroyed a sports empire while the world wasn't paying attention, and how Dr. Harvey Schiller, the man who built Turner Sports into a powerhouse, watched helplessly as everything he created burned to the ground. If you enjoy uncovering the economic stories that shaped our world while most people slept through them, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And make sure you click the notification bell, because we're diving deep into financial mysteries that Wall Street doesn't want you to understand. Chapter 1. The Empire Before the Storm. To understand how spectacularly Turner Sports collapsed, you need to understand how impossibly dominant it once was. Ted Turner wasn't just a businessman, he was a maverick who transformed American media. In 1976, he purchased the Atlanta Braves for just $12 million. By the 1990s, the team was worth hundreds of millions. He added the Atlanta Hawks basketball team to his portfolio. Then in 1999, brought the NHL's Atlanta Thrashers into existence. But Turner's crown jewel wasn't a traditional sport at all. It was World Championship Wrestling. WCW, under the leadership of Eric Bischoff and overseen by Dr. Harvey Schiller, Turner's president of Turner Sports, had accomplished something unprecedented. From 1996 to 1998, WCW Monday Nitro consistently beat WWE's Monday Night Raw in television ratings. Think about that. Turner had created a wrestling show that was defeating Vince McMahon, the man who had monopolized professional wrestling for decades, week after week after week. WCW was generating hundreds of millions in revenue. Stars like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Randy Savage, and Goldberg were household names. The company was thriving. Dr. Harvey Schiller, a former Air Force brigadier general and Olympic executive, ran Turner Sports with military precision. He understood that sports weren't just entertainment. They were brands, media properties, and long-term investments. Under his watch, the Turner broadcasting cable networks DBS and TNT had premium content that kept millions of subscribers paying their cable bills every month. Turner Sports wasn't just profitable. It was a strategic asset that made Turner Broadcasting indispensable. By 1995, Ted Turner's company was so valuable that Time Warner purchased Turner Broadcasting System in a merger worth $8 billion. Turner became Time Warner's largest individual shareholder and vice chairman. He was worth over $7 billion personally. Everything seemed perfect. Everything seemed secure. Then came the decision that would destroy it all. In January 2000, Time Warner agreed to merge with AOL in what was trumpeted as a $165 billion megadeal, the largest corporate merger in American history. AOL was the darling of the dot-com boom, and Time Warner executives believed combining old media with new media would create an unstoppable empire. Ted Turner supported the merger. He had no idea he had just signed his own death warrant. Chapter 2. The Poison Pill. The AOL Time Warner merger closed in January 2001, and almost immediately, everything went wrong. The dot-com bubble burst. AOL's subscriber numbers began declining. The company's stock, which had soared to dizzying heights, started collapsing. Ted Turner watched helplessly as his $7 billion fortune evaporated. Within 2 years, he would lose $8 billion to 80% of his entire wealth as AOL Time Warner stock cratered. But Turner's personal financial catastrophe was only the beginning. The new AOL Time Warner leadership had a problem. The company was drowning in $24 billion of debt. They needed to cut costs and sell assets fast, and they had zero emotional attachment to Ted Turner's beloved sports properties. In March 2001, the new corporate overlords made a decision that sealed Turner Sports' fate. They appointed Jamie Kellner as chairman and CEO of Turner Broadcasting. Kellner was a television executive with an impressive resume. He had helped launch the Fox network and created the WB. He was responsible for hits like The Simpsons and Beverly Hills, 90,210. He understood entertainment television. But he had one very specific opinion about Turner Sports. He hated it. Kellner particularly despised professional wrestling. He thought it was low class, advertiser unfriendly, and incompatible with the upscale image he wanted for Turner's cable networks. He looked at WCW's programming on TNT and TBS and saw not a revenue generator, but an embarrassment. Never mind that WCW had millions of loyal viewers. Never mind that wrestling fans were some of the most engaged audiences in television. Kellner had decided WCW had to go. Dr. Harvey Schiller, still technically overseeing Turner Sports, could see what was coming. He had spent years building WCW into a viable WE competitor. He understood the long-term value of the sports properties. But after the AOL merger, Schiller no longer had real power. The new corporate structure had sidelined him. Turner was being pushed out, and Jamie Kellner was now in control. The young executive who had built Turner Sports into a powerhouse had run out of aggressive solutions. By early 2001, WCW was in trouble. After its dominance in the late 1990s, creative missteps and backstage chaos had caused ratings to decline. The company lost $62 million in 2000 alone. But losing money didn't mean the brand was worthless. Far from it. Eric Bischoff had assembled Fusient Media Ventures with $67 million to purchase WCW. The deal included television contracts and a planned relaunch. Serious investors believed in WCW's future. The sale was moving forward. Then Jamie Kellner made his move. In March 2001, he canceled all WCW programming on TNT and TBS. Just like that. No negotiation, no transition period. He simply removed WCW from Turner's networks. And here's the kicker. The Fusient Media purchase agreement required WCW to have television time. Without it, WCW wasn't worth $67 million. Without television, WCW was worth almost nothing. Kellner knew exactly what he was doing. He had just destroyed WCW's value overnight. Chapter 3. The $4 million humiliation. With WCW's television time canceled and the Fusient deal dead, there was only one buyer left, Vince McMahon. The man who WCW had beaten in the ratings for 83 consecutive weeks. The man Ted Turner had humiliated throughout the late 1990s. The man who had watched helplessly as his stars defected to WCW for bigger paychecks. Now Vince McMahon had all the leverage in the world. On March 23, 2001, WWE purchased W's intellectual property, tape library, and contracts for a paltry $4.2 million. Let me repeat that. A wrestling promotion that had been valued at $67 million just weeks earlier was sold for $4.2 million. The brand that had generated hundreds of millions in revenue. The company that had nearly destroyed WWE, gone for less than the cost of a single luxury home. For Ted Turner, it was devastating. For Dr. Harvey Schiller, who who had overseen WC's rise, it was heartbreaking. For Jamie Kellner, it was just business. He had eliminated what he viewed as an embarrassment to Turner Broadcasting. The fact that he had destroyed tens of millions of dollars in shareholder value in the process didn't seem to bother him. But Kellner wasn't done. WCW was just the beginning of the Turner Sports fire sale. Next up, the actual sports teams. Chapter 4. Selling the Crown Jewels. AOL Time Warner was still drowning in debt, and Turner's sports teams were obvious targets for asset sales. Jamie Kellner and the corporate leadership had no sentimental attachment to the Braves, Hawks, or Thrashers. These weren't media properties that fit the company's vision. They were just assets to be liquidated. In September 2003, AOL Time Warner sold the Atlanta Hawks and Atlanta Thrashers, along with their arena, Phillips Arena, for $250 million to a group called Atlanta Spirit LLC. On paper, $250 million sounds substantial, but context matters. These were two professional sports franchises in a major American city, plus a state-of-the-art arena. By any measure, $250 million was a fire sale price. And it gets worse. A Texas businessman named David McDavid had been negotiating to buy the teams since April 2003. He claims Time Warner had agreed to a deal, then suddenly sold to Atlanta Spirit instead for a lower price. McDavid sued, arguing Time Warner breached their contract. In 2008, a jury agreed and awarded McDavid $316 million in damages. Let that sink in. Time Warner sold the teams for $250 million, got sued, and ended up paying out $316 million. They would have been better off not selling the teams at all. The Atlanta Braves took a bit longer to unload, but in 2007, Time Warner finally sold the team to Liberty Media. The reported purchase price was approximately $450 million, though the exact structure involved stock swaps that valued the deal closer to $1.5 billion, depending on how you calculate it. Either way, Time Warner had sold off the last piece of Ted Turner's sports empire. Let's add it up. WCW, $4.2 million. Hawks and Thrashers, $250 million. Braves, $450 million to $1.5 billion, depending on valuation. At minimum, Turner Sports assets were liquidated for around $700 million. At maximum, maybe $1.75 billion. These were properties that Turner had built over decades, that had generated billions in value and cultural impact, and that serious analysts believed were worth far more. The Braves alone would later be valued at over $3 billion. But Jamie Kellner and the AOL Time Warner executives weren't interested in long-term value. They wanted to reduce debt, cut costs, and move on. Turner Sports wasn't part of their vision, so they dismantled it, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, while most of America wasn't paying attention. Chapter 5. The Aftermath of Destruction. Ted Turner resigned as vice chairman of AOL Time Warner in 2003. The man who had built a media empire, who had launched CNN and changed cable television forever, was now a bystander. His fortune had been gutted. His sports teams were gone. His wrestling company had been sold to his biggest rival for nothing. In interviews years later, Turner would admit the pain of losing not just his money, but his legacy. When asked if he'd ever consider buying back his former assets, he replied simply, "I can't afford them now." Dr. Harvey Schiller, the executive who had overseen Turner Sports' rise, moved on to other roles. But the dismantling of the empire he helped build remained a painful chapter. WC Double Notion that had nearly toppled WWE became a punchline, remembered not for its dominance, but for its spectacular collapse. As for Jamie Kellner, he left Turner Broadcasting in February 2003 with a $128 million payout. Yes, you read that right. the man who presided over the destruction of Turner Sports, walked away with $128 million. He would go on to other ventures, his reputation in Hollywood largely intact. After all, he hadn't failed. He had simply executed the corporate strategy. He had cut costs, sold assets, and eliminated programming he deemed unworthy of the Turner networks. The Thrashers never recovered from the chaotic ownership of Atlanta Spirit. The team struggled financially and artistically, and in 2011, just 7 years after the sale, the franchise relocated to Winnipeg, becoming the Jets. Atlanta, which had been given an NHL team as part of Turner's sports empire, lost it forever. The Hawks remained in Atlanta under Atlanta Spirit, but went through years of mediocrity before eventually being sold again in 2015 to Tony Ressler's group for $850 million, more than 3 times what the Hawks and Thrashers combined sold for in 2004. The Braves, now under Liberty Media, would go on to thrive, eventually being valued at over $3 billion. Ted Turner, the man who had nurtured the team for decades, no longer had any stake. And WCW? It became a library of footage that WWE would mine for documentaries, DVDs, and nostalgia programming. The brand that had almost destroyed Vince McMahon ended up making McMahon even richer. Chapter 6. The Lessons in Billions. So what do we learn from the destruction of Turner Sports? First, corporate mergers are incredibly dangerous for legacy assets. When AOL and Time Warner merged, the executives from AOL had no emotional or strategic attachment to Ted Turner's sports properties. They saw only balance sheet liabilities and opportunities to cut costs. The long-term cultural and financial value didn't matter. The quarterly earnings report did. Second, never underestimate the power of a single executive to destroy value. Jamie Kellner's decision to cancel WCW programming wiped out tens of millions of dollars in value overnight. One signature, one meeting, one executive decision. That's all it takes to obliterate a brand that took decades to build. Third, understand that debt makes companies desperate. AOL Time Warner's $24 billion debt load forced executives to sell assets quickly and at depressed prices. When you're drowning in debt, you don't negotiate for maximum value, you take whatever offer gets you cash fast. Turner Sports was sacrificed on the altar of corporate debt reduction. Fourth, institutional knowledge matters. Dr. Harvey Schiller understood the value of Turner Sports because he built it. Jamie Kellner didn't. He saw wrestling fans as an embarrassment, not as a valuable audience. He didn't understand the long-term strategic value of owning professional sports teams in a growing Sunbelt city. When companies sideline the executives who built their assets and replace them with outsiders focused only on short-term metrics, value destruction is almost inevitable. Finally, the biggest lesson: wealth isn't truly yours if it's only on paper. Ted Turner was worth over $7 billion in the late 1990s, almost entirely in AOL Time Warner stock. When that stock collapsed, so did his fortune. He couldn't stop the company from dismantling his life's work because he no longer controlled the company. The merger that seemed like a brilliant strategic move in 2000 became the decision that cost him everything. Today, this story is mostly forgotten. WCW is remembered as a wrestling failure, not as a cautionary tale of corporate value destruction. The sale of the Braves is seen as a routine transaction, not as part of the systematic dismantling of an empire. Ted Turner is remembered for CNN and saving the Buffalo, not for losing $8 billion in the worst corporate merger in history. But for those who pay attention, the destruction of Turner Sports is one of the most important economic stories of the early 21st century. It's a story about corporate greed, executive incompetence, and the danger of mixing emotional legacy assets with cold-blooded Wall Street efficiency. Jamie Kellner destroyed Turner Sports. He dismantled the Braves, the Hawks, the Thrashers, and WCW. He sold them off for a fraction of their value, and he walked away with $128 million. Dr. Harvey Schiller watched the empire he built crumble. Ted Turner lost $8 billion. And most people never even noticed. If stories like this, where we uncovered the economic events that shaped our world, while most people weren't paying attention, fascinate you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we're just getting started with these financial educational mysteries.